Good morning, Dan and Amy. So President Trump, as well as Speaker Ryan, both expressed some frustration with the Freedom Caucus. And Trump did it via Twitter with exclamation points. Paul Ryan did it, but with a note of optimism yesterday.
I understand the president's frustration. I share frustration. About 90% of our conference is for this bill to repeal and replace Obamacare, and about 10% are not. And that's not enough to pass a bill. We're close. What I am encouraging our members to do is keep talking with each other until we can get the consensus to pass this bill. But it's very understandable that the president is frustrated that we haven't gotten to where we need to go, because this is something we all said we would do.
So it seems like there's two things happening simultaneously. One, a source of optimism, that is Judge Neil Gorsuch's nomination to the Supreme Court, particularly buoyed yesterday with the announcement by both Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia and Senator Heidi Heitkamp from North Dakota, two states that Trump, I believe, won unanimously. I don't think there was a single vote for Hillary Clinton in either one of those states. So those are two Democrats up for re-election in 2018, and they'd like to be re-elected. So they've announced they're going to vote to confirm Neil Gorsuch, which certainly undermines Senate Minority Leader Pagliacci, who will probably be shedding tears today in response to those announcements. That's an area of optimism. That's almost sure to be next Friday a promise made and delivered by Donald Trump. But on Obamacare replacement, this is a source of some concern. And another group that's been targeted on Twitter by Trump for their obstinance on this issue is the Heritage Foundation. And we're pleased to be joined by our friend who's the president of the Heritage Foundation. He is former South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint. Mr. DeMint, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, Dan and Amy, it's great to be back with you. A lot going on in Washington. For the most part, President Trump has got a lot of good things going on, particularly with the Supreme Court, energy now, and Justice Department. But he got some bad advice on this health care bill, and we're trying to help him straighten it out. But what they've got in the House now is nothing like what they promised before the election.
Now, just Mark Meadows, who's the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, suggested that they're just two mandate repeals away from a deal. And so is that your position at the Heritage Foundation as well? If you repeal the essential benefits mandate, if you repeal the community rating mandate, then we could have a deal.
Well, those would really get at a lot of the cost drivers, and that's really what we've been talking about. There's a lot in this bill we don't like, but if you're going to do something, at least push down the cost of health insurance, and the original bill didn't do that. What Mark Meadows and the Freedom Caucus is talking about, I mean, they've conceded a lot of points on Medicaid expansion and refundable tax credits and a lot of stuff. But if they can just get out those 2 points, and that's not all the regulations, then that we have a chance at lowering the cost of health insurance and beginning to create a more market-based, patient-centered healthcare system.
You had mentioned that he had gotten some bad advice. What advice was that, and from whom?
Well, we had a bill, and that had been passed through the House and the Senate and sent to Obama, and actually about 18 months ago, just to show what they would do. And the promise was if they had a Republican president, they would send that through the first week after his inauguration. And it was basic repeal. It didn't accomplish everything because you still had to come back and improve the system, but it changed the subject from whether or not we were going to repeal to how we're going to make the system better. So they did a practice run. They promised to do it, but then once President Trump was inaugurated, things got quiet for about 5 or 6 weeks, and then suddenly something came out that was really Obamacare. It conceded national health care in the sense that it left a federal regulated insurance market in place, federally subsidized insurance, and basically continued to push people onto Medicaid as a default insurance plan. And none of that is positive, but we can get by a lot of that if we can just get some of the regulations out that would allow the prices to begin to come down.
Now, as someone who understands Capitol Hill very well, serving in the U.S. Senate as you did, how do you see this playing out, and particularly with getting a more aggressive replacement through the U.S. Senate where the margin of error, if you will, is a bit smaller?
We've encouraged the the House Republicans just to send a really good bill over to the Senate and stop listening to all this talk about what the parliamentarian will approve and what she won't approve. They need to take these things that they promise, like interstate competition and small business health plans and a number of other things, put them in the bill, pass it in the House, send it over to the Senate. Let the Senate figure out all the parliamentarian stuff. And so I think trying to dumb it down in anticipation of what the Senate can and can't do has been a big mistake. So hopefully they will make this bill better, get it on the floor next week, and send it over to the Senate, and then I think we'll get some momentum in a positive direction.
What advice would you have for President Trump? I mean, he did tweet out that, taking aim at the Freedom Caucus, saying, you better get on board or you're going to lose in 2018.
Yeah. Well, conservatives don't bow to that kind of pressure, and unfortunately, some of Trump's biggest supporters in the election are in the Freedom Caucus. Mark Meadows campaigned all over North Carolina for him. It's not a good approach. Intimidation is not going to work. It's not going to work on the Heritage Foundation. And again, I think some bad advice. The only way to make this work is to realize that the House bill is bad. It's not the kind of thing that Trump is used to actually going out and promoting. He sells first-class stuff. And so hopefully we can be a part of the solution. It appears that the House leadership is listening to some of the ideas that are coming from Senator Mike Lee and others. So I'm cautiously optimistic that they can work this out, but they're not going to work it out by trying to intimidate the real patriots in the House, and that's the Freedom Caucus. Those are the folks that are fighting for the things that we all believe in.
Should Trump and Speaker Ryan and Senate Majority Leader McConnell be less worried about stalwart conservative reformers and more worried about big government Republicans? I note this story from your outlet, the Daily Signal, dailysignal.com. Appropriators disapprove of Trump budget cuts, where you have Senator John Cornyn from Texas and others essentially balking at some of the spending cuts that Trump has proposed in his kind of budget outline.
Well, everybody's got to agree that we've got to figure out some things to cut or we're going to bankrupt our country. I mean, we're on an unsustainable path. If we can't cut things like funding Planned Parenthood or public broadcasting that we don't have to do at the federal level, if we can't cut those things, how are we going to deal with changing Social Security and Medicare in the future for the next generation so that it actually continues? We've got to make hard decisions, and those who look at a budget like this that are very modest in reducing the increase in spending have to put some things on the table themselves of what do they think should be cut, because we can't keep doing what we're doing. So Republicans have been promising things for years. I'm very disappointed that they would look at a budget like this as is similar to some that they have passed, because we've all been talking about how do you get the budget balanced over the next 10 years. And that's not a very aggressive goal. Wait 10 years to balance the budget.
Right.
So Republicans need to stop complaining about the people who are standing for the Republican platform and start cajoling those who are really closer to the Democrats than they are Republicans.
But if the Freedom Caucus, the Republicans, don't fall in line for appeal and replace of Obamacare, how's it going to be when they go to the tax reform?
That's the real problem. If they can't figure out Obamacare, where they already had a plan, they'd already voted on it and made a clear promise to Americans, if they can't put that through, then I don't know how they're going to deal with something that's more complex and much even more politically volatile on tax reform. So they can't make the same mistake on tax reform that they just put something out, surprise everybody, and they don't do any negotiations in advance. So this is just a bad signal. For the most part, the Trump administration has had a great start with the things that they can control. But Congress has been very slow. The Senate needs to work longer hours to get a lot of these nominations confirmed. So Congress needs to get itself in gear and stop complaining about the conservatives who want to keep the promises that they all made at last year's election.
And on that positive side of the ledger, the other big news this week was the executive orders to advance energy independence and end the war on fossil fuels in America.
Gosh, very, very encouraging. It's one of the best opportunities we have as a country to lower the price of energy, to increase tax revenues that'll help deal with our deficit. And if we begin to export, particularly compressed natural gas, I mean, we could put Russia out of business if we wanted to, because our European allies are so dependent on Russia for energy. So it would solve a whole lot of problems, and so the administration is definitely moving in a very positive direction there.
Again, as somebody who served in the Senate with the Senate Intel Committee convening yesterday to take up all of this Russian intrigue, what's your sense of where this story goes based on what we understand to be true at this juncture?
Well, the main concern I have about Russia is really the contacts that Hillary Clinton had in the State Department and a lot of documented quid pro quo that seem to be going on. But for the most of the part, this is just a distraction and a diversion. I know they said that Jeff Sessions had secret meetings with the Russians. One of those was with 50 other ambassadors at a heritage function.
Right.
At the Republican. I mean, it was like 5 people who asking questions on the way out the door, and one of them happened to be the Russian ambassador. So most of this is just, stupid stuff. But they have to look into it now that they've made an issue of it. But they need to get past this, and I would think credible news outlets need to focus on the things that are real right now.
He is Heritage Foundation president and former United States Senator from South Carolina, Jim DeMint. Jim, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Well, thank you both, and hello to the Windy City. We'll see you soon.
Thanks very much. And you can also check out, I did a sit-down interview against the current series on upstream-ideas.com late last year with Jim DeMint, and a lot of his musings and insights are more relevant today than even they were back before Trump was inaugurated. So you want to check that out. Upstream-ideas.com or against this current interview series.
And Senator Jim DeMint joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper, hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.